Hi guys, so obviously last time we did NCT Dream and we're going to stick on the SM train and do Super Junior. This one's been really requested and it was a really hard one to make, so thank you very much for requesting them. Let's get straight into it. Okay, so quite a lot of disclaimers before we start the video. Firstly, as I've mentioned a few times already, I've got a Patreon account. If you guys want to have a little bit extra content, some requests here and there, and you want some other things and more interactions with me, feel free to support me on there. Any support will be amazing. Okay, to anybody that isn't subscribed to the channel, firstly, if you could, that'd be really nice. You know, if you enjoy the videos, please subscribe, it really helps me out. But the way we're doing this video, me and my subscribers have decided, we're doing a 13-man Super Junior. We're including Henry and Zhoumi, but we are not doing people like Hangeng and Kibum. And we are also including former member Kangin because he hasn't left that long ago, whereas the other two had left a long time ago and it was really hard to get clips for them. So apologies if you wanted an original 15, I get why, but at the same time it was easier to kind of do the 13 as they are with the two Chinese members. It was just, there was more content, there was more to work with, and they hadn't left a decade ago. So yeah. Also, I've seen a lot of rankings for Super Junior online. Most of them obviously with a subjective bias. It was very hard to objectively rank them because a lot of their abilities are very similar and I was flip-flopping between a lot of them. But just, if your favourite is like 9th or 10th on this list, please don't be offended. Like, being 9th or 10th in Super Junior is like being a lead vocalist anywhere else. They're all so incredibly talented at singing. Also, just, I don't want this video to be like 55 minutes, so instead of speaking for 2.5 minutes like I normally would for each member, I'm going to try and be a little bit more succinct. I'm still going to analyse the way I always do and mention strengths and weaknesses and all that sort of thing. I'm just going to try and condense it down a little bit to speak for maybe only a minute or less for each person. So yes, I'll be going a little bit quicker through people, but I'll still try my best to do the same sort of style as we always do. Okay, with all out of the way, Super Junior vocal ranking. Let's go. Okay, so most rankings I saw put somebody else last, but to me Eunhyuk's voice is the one that has kind of the most it could work on. It's still really good and really strong, but it's got the most it could iron out. Let's have a look. Okay, so Eunhyuk's voice, again, it's improved significantly over the years. The older clips were a lot worse than the new clips. The only issue with his voice really is because he sings kind of a little bit lighter naturally. When he tries to stay a bit more full and more connected, he lowers his larynx quite obviously to go like, and that's a really unsustainable sound, and it's really fatiguing to do that technique too much. In the middle of his voice it still sounds light, it sounds nice, and the tuning is okay. It's not as good as the people above him, and his voice doesn't have the most that it can do. As it goes up, it goes very into his nose and very nasal. Again, as I always say, if you use that to lighten your tone, like he does to a point, it can give you a really nice balanced mix. Unfortunately, Eunhyuk's voice doesn't really do that. It kind of gets stuck in this nasal place and doesn't really have much of a mix it can get into, or really much in the way of kind of power potential. He's got a nice head voice though, surprisingly lovely falsetto usage, and his voice is agile and light and nice and flexible, and it's got a little bit to it. It just, as I say, it gets stuck with the nasal placement or lowers his larynx to achieve a more full sound rather than having a naturally bigger instrument like the guys coming up do. So I think his voice is decent, it's been significantly improved over the years. It just has the least mix potential and kind of the least tuning in the group in my opinion, but his voice is still pretty solid. Okay, so pretty much every ranking I saw put Shindong last, and I understand why and will explain why, but I'll explain why I think he's a little bit better than last place. Alright, so Shindong, when he sings in the Super Junior style, he doesn't sound like exceptional. His voice is very heavy, very full, and very rounded and very big. Often when he was singing kind of in the Super Junior style, he was using a lighter coordination to put a lot more air into it, to lighten his sound to get in these same areas. And while he had control doing that, his voice sounded pretty good and pretty solid. It wasn't where it excelled. It went kind of far back and into his nose a little bit and didn't sound too sustainable. However, Shindong had a strength that he didn't use a whole lot when I was researching. When he stayed really full and really connected, yes, his voice didn't have much to it and the tuning wasn't like amazing, the musicality wasn't fantastic, but he had an ability to get into a really strong mix. Like, it wasn't like a very balanced mix or anything like that. He didn't bring a lot of head voice into it. He kind of pulled a lot of weight, a lot of chest, but he had this big, robust sound, and his tonal quality overall was quite rich and quite full. Yes, it was a bit far back and went a little bit into his nose on occasion, which means he can't really be any higher than this, and his voice didn't have enough versatility to be much higher than this. But to me, he had slightly more of a rounded, robust sound than Eunhyuk does, and he had a bit of a less of an issue with nasal placement and lower laryngeal position. So to me, Shindong's voice was big, it was full, it was rich, didn't have a lot to it and couldn't be very versatile, but he had an upper mix that he could use. Yes, it was a little bit too much pressure, but it was nice, it was fun, it was interesting, and if he could explore that more, he could possibly be even higher on this list. But yeah, the two bottom ones are kind of interchangeable depending on what you deem worse and deem better, but to me, Shindong's voice had a little bit more it could do. Okay, so Eunhyuk and Shindong are the bottom two. They just kind of are. I think everyone accepts that. From here on out, it gets kind of up for debate, and people will put a lot of different people in a lot of different places. To me, I've been as objective as I can, and for me, Siwon has the kind of weakest voice of everybody else. It's still good though, which shows how good these guys are as vocalists. So let's look into his voice. Okay, so Siwon's voice is kind of quite full, quite rich and quite deep. He has a much kind of further back placement than most of the people in the group. Again, this gives him kind of a rich timbre and a really kind of full hooty sound. The only issue with it is, as always, it's really hard to bring any sort of kind of head voice back down into this place. But that isn't as big of an issue as it was for Shindong. He had an ability to lighten his tone, Siwon did, to kind of make it a bit lighter, a bit airier, a bit breathy. And he could go into slightly higher places. Yes, he didn't do it in an extremely balanced way, and his power potential up here wasn't great, despite the fact he had quite a rich, full tone, which shows that he wasn't mixing exceptionally well. He was mainly lightening this hootier place. And that's kind of the only issue his voice had. It kind of got stuck in this far back placement, and to kind of alleviate for that, he pulled a little bit of chest or lightened it too much. To the point where it either sounded a little bit squeezed and strained without kind of much mix potential, or it sounded a little bit too light without much power potential. So to me, his voice had a bit more versatility than the bottom two, and because he also, when he was doing Lost Stars, the Adam Levine cover, he kind of lightened his tone a lot more, put it a little bit more into his nose, and sounded much more resonant in this area. He didn't do it a whole lot, and I only heard him kind of sing like that in that clip. Normally he's quite far back and quite hooty, but his voice had a little bit more versatility. His placement wasn't like exceptional, but he had a pretty good voice. It could go up in pitch a bit better than the other two guys I've mentioned, and it had a little bit more to it in terms of colours. Just the placement kind of held him back, and he didn't have much of a robust, balanced sound. It was more hooty, far back, and just kind of full and deep. Okay, so some people might be a bit shocked to see Henry this low. The guy is a musical virtuoso. He has such a musical ability, and that's very clear. And he's a very smart musician. I'll explain what I mean by that in a second.
My life, you've hurt me. You've broken my heart. 이렇게, oh baby, 날 노래해. Oh, 벌써 몇 년째 들리는지 난 모르겠어 이게 정말 나의 길일까 이 길의 끝에 그건 누굴 위한 꿈일까 이 그 꿈이 누굴까
So Henry has a super Western commercialized sound, which means that he's very intelligent with the way he sings. I'd like to say he's got a lot of colours to his voice. He sounds kind of naturally a bit lighter, like a classic pop singer. He has a more airy, breathy delivery, which he does beef up and get into higher places. He's got a pretty good mix up at the top, and he can utilise a lot of different areas of his voice very well, and a lot of them have a colour that works very well. You can pick him out of a crowd. He's got a very light, Western commercialised voice. The reason I've put him this low is he uses his voice very smartly, but not very efficiently. He gets into places and makes parts pop into the songs, so it's very clever, and he gets into these bigger areas and people go, wow, that's amazing, but he is pulling so much chest and so much weight. Because he's got such a light delivery naturally, to get into any sort of kind of powerful place, he's pulling a hell of a lot of chest and it's going straight into his throat. You can see whenever he does a massive note, it's crackling because his voice is kind of straining really hard to get there. The reason I put him higher than the rest of the guys is he's got more to his voice. The colours are more nuanced, there's more to it, there's more versatility, and if he literally put his placement a bit more forward and kind of in his head or his nose even, rather than his throat, he would have infinitely more success. And his voice clearly has a lot of range, a lot of access, a lot of potential, and because he does a lot of things quite well, but could do them a lot better, because as I say, you can see him like pulling away when he's doing big notes, because yes, he's getting there and he is mixing. If he wasn't mixing, you couldn't do that at all, your voice would crack. He's using too much throat-based coordination, and if he kind of alleviated that, he would be exceptional and much, much, much higher on this list, because he's got a versatile, light, lovely Western delivery. Just, he's gonna hurt himself. Okay, so for me, the placements I've done so far are quite easy. From now on, it gets really hard. Everybody from here on out is awesome in their own kind of way. For me, Kangin is the one with the least amount to his voice of everybody else left, but he's still exceptionally good at singing and will be a lead vocalist in any other group with his manly delivery. Let's have a look at what he can do. Okay, so as I say, Kangin's got a really masculine, full, thick baritone voice. He uses his voice a little bit more intelligently than Shindong and Siwon, however. Yes, he placed it still a little bit far back. However, he doesn't have the same issue of mixing. His mix is still quite good and quite full. It's not in really super high areas like people coming up. It hasn't got like an exceptionally big belt or balanced area or much head voice ability, but he can lighten his tone in the most balanced way so far, and because his voice isn't as far back as some of the guys I've mentioned. It's full, it's rich, it's got a really big open sound to it, it's got a lot of depth to it as well, and as he brings it up, he's not pulling up way too much weight or too much chest. He lightens it very nicely. It's not too airy, not too breathy, it's just a nice light coordination. His vocal cords aren't too far together, which means that he's not pulling up too much pressure, but they're also far together enough for the fact that it still sounds robust and sounds big. He's got a nice balanced, beautiful, masculine instrument. He just doesn't do much in the way of mix potential or really high or technically difficult vocal parts, so that's why I've put him kind of this low. I think his voice is balanced and very good and very consistent and very nice. It isn't super versatile, hasn't got super varied colours or much to it in terms of kind of a mix potential or power potential, but where it works, it sounds very nice, and when he lightens it into a slightly higher place, it sounds free and sounds easy. He's got a nice, easy vocal delivery, just there isn't too much to it above that. Okay, so while I was researching, Leeteuk often appeared in like the bottom 3 of people's lists, and I respectfully highly disagree. The guy's voice had a lot more to it than that. It wasn't perfect, which I'll get into, but it was still a pretty good voice. Let's have a look at it. so Leeteuk's voice, it was kind of interesting. He tended to stay kind of a bit lighter in his low range. It wasn't too breathy or anything. His chords were still together, nice and close. He had a good, pretty solid delivery. His tuning wasn't fantastic, so in his low range, while he had it and it sounded rich and sounded nice, it sounded a little bit off occasionally, but that's a minor musical issue that you can tweak out just with ears. The main strength of his voice is he had a really, really good belt. It was quite surprising when I looked at it, because when he placed it in his head, opened his mouth wide and let out a big blaring open sound with good connection, his voice sounded full, it sounded big, and I was like, whoa, why is he so low on people's lists? And I understood why. Around that area, when he's kind of getting up to a belt or when he's just leaving a belt, his voice gets stuck a little bit in his throat and his mix isn't super balanced. Yes, it's very big and very powerful when he places it in that place, but except from when he does get to that note and places it perfectly for that particular note, the surrounding area isn't quite as smooth and isn't quite as balanced. That's what places him this low. If he could work out that little bit, he will be like lead vocalist levels of ability, because he's also got a really nice head voice as well, and he can his passage navigation's pretty solid. It's just his placement's very inconsistent when it comes to his belt. It's got a nice rich full sound up in that area when he opens his mouth wide and puts it in his head and puts it forward, but he also has an ability to kind of put it into his throat a little bit around that area. If he could alleviate that, he'd be much better. And to me, his voice has more colours and is a little bit more versatile than everyone I mentioned so far, and it's achieved slightly healthier, and his overall instrument's got a bit more to it for me personally. If you put him a little bit low, I get it. Put him a little bit higher, I get it. But this is kind of where I feel as though he belongs. Okay, so people might be a bit surprised to see Donghae this low on the list, as he is listed as a lead vocalist on the Super Junior members page that I saw. He's still a very, very good singer, but I'll explain why I've put him this low. So to me, Donghae has a lead vocalist title because his voice is very naturally stylized and very light. He's got a kind of a higher sitting placed voice, which he does use quite well when he gets into his low range. It's not as supernatural as it could be. His chords aren't mega together, so it's not got that much of a rich ability in the low range, but he's got it and it's pretty nice. His voice is very free, very easy, and very balanced in the middle of his voice with a nice, light, bright kind of timbre. It's not like super varied or anything, but he has a much easier time and very good tuning and much better compared to the guys I mentioned so far in terms of staying in a nice balanced middle place. The only issue with him, the reason I haven't put him too much higher, is because as he goes up a little bit, yes, it balances into a pretty decent mix, but also goes quite nasal quite fast. And again, that's fine when you use it to kind of balance your tone, as you will discover later on with someone who uses nasality to god tier levels of perfection. But Donghae's voice isn't quite as balanced when it does that. It gets a little bit stuck and the placement becomes a little bit kind of in his throat, a little bit harder to maintain. So yeah, his voice is really light and bright and capable of very easy vocal passages in his lighter, higher area. It doesn't need to press too hard to get to them or really use too much grab or too much pressure, which is good, which is why I put him this high. It's a consistent, balanced, nice instrument. Because as it goes up, it goes a little bit nasal and it doesn't balance extremely well. But his voice is still fantastic and he deserves a lead vocalist title, but it's because he can sing in such a stylized high way, which is obviously what SM really enjoys. But yeah, his voice is nice, it's free, it's easy, it's balanced. It just has a slight nasal placement issue as it goes higher, and the mix isn't as good as the people coming up. That's all. Okay, so for me the next two are very interchangeable. I'm changing my mind on them all the time. One to me is more impressive, one is more consistent. I went with my heart and said that the one that's more consistent is here, which is Sungmin. I think his voice is very good. Let's delve into it.
상자 속 그대로 혼자만 날아요 태엽을
so to me, Sungmin's voice so far, of everyone I've mentioned, is the most balanced. He has, again, a small tendency to put it a little bit into his nose and lighten the tone, which therefore kind of alleviates a lot of pressure that he does. However, he does occasionally bring up a little bit too much weight to kind of compensate for the fact that he's in this higher, lighter nasal place, but that's a very, very minor issue, and it doesn't do it anywhere near as badly as Donghae does. Not badly, kind of just not as inefficiently, I suppose. When he's in his upper range, he kind of uses a little bit more chord closure, stays in like a bit of a bigger place, and unleashes really nice chest dominant belts. Again, there's a little bit of throatiness in there, but not enough to really be an issue, and a little bit of nasality, but once again, not enough to really be a problem. His passage navigation is also exceptionally good, and he has a lovely falsetto, and his low range is pretty strong when he stays fully connected, and he has nice tuning, and overall a very reliable sound, very good instrument. It just doesn't have necessarily much in the way of a higher upper really balanced mix that pretty much everybody else I'm going to mention so far does. I think his voice is consistent, very good in the middle of his range, doesn't have a massive nasal placement issue, but it's slightly there, and doesn't have a huge throaty issue, but it is slightly there as well. But overall his voice is balanced, it's mixed very well and very efficiently and very nice. It just lacks kind of the upper power vocals to really mega impress me, even though his kind of chest dominant mix that he does unleash occasionally around the G, maybe A4 sort of area, is consistent, is very nice, and is very strong. So yeah, I think Sungmin's voice is exceptional, it's very well blended, it's very balanced, it's very good, just kind of lacks all the impressive super high stuff of all the guys coming up, and to me that's just kind of what puts everyone else above him. But he's a very, very good balanced singer. Okay, I'm assuming a lot of you are wondering where would Heechul be. Some people put him really high, some people put him really low. To me, this is where he belongs because he's got an impressive voice, if not technically a little bit inconsistent, but we'll get into that. So to me, the reason I've ranked him higher is Heechul's voice can do everything Sungmin's can do and a little bit more sometimes. His technique is very hit and miss, but when it's hit, it's awesome. Okay, so he again stays with more of a chord closure. He doesn't sing with much of a light delivery or a breathy delivery, which means his whole instrument is really balanced and really smooth and all sounds very much the same, and like he can do the middle of his voice all day, every day, and he's got a really consistent, very good, very solid, robust instrument, and that's fantastic, that's wonderful. As well as that, his versatility is very good. He sings ballads extremely well, he sings rock songs that I've seen extremely well because of a technique implements that I'll mention in 1 second, and he sings pop very well. Okay, so what he tends to do is he goes into an upper mix, a slightly higher, slightly stronger upper mix than I think Sungmin has. Sometimes he puts it in his head, places it slightly in his nose and slightly further forward, and unleashes these really blaring, bright, beautiful vowels. Amazing, the placement is fantastic, and they sound powerful, robust, strong, and amazing. Unfortunately, Heechul has a slight tendency, occasionally, to not do that placement and go straight from his throat to go for like a Rocky belt. And while he gets there, it sounds strained and like he's reaching for the note rather than just hitting it dead on with beautiful tuning. So basically his technique is a little bit inconsistent, his kind of placement is a little bit inconsistent, but when he gets it right, his placement allows him to do really impressive power vocals that I think are absolutely exceptional, and his versatility really helps him, and I think his versatility in genres and the way he delivers his sound puts him this high on the list. So I really like his voice, I think it's really strong, and I've heard the vocal line, think he's also a very good singer, even though he doubts himself a little bit. So yeah, inconsistent placement, but when he gets it right, and it's amazing. Just has a habit and a tendency occasionally to pull a little bit too much of a throaty sound to go for these really rock belts. But his versatility is absolutely there, and for anybody that remembers Heechul for like an 11 years ago slight mistake crack on a show, like, stop being silly. Everyone has bad days, and you shouldn't remember for that. You should remember him for all the exceptional vocal moments he has shown. So yeah, Heechul is awesome. Okay, so you guys might be surprised to see, I believe it's pronounced Zhoumi this high. If that's wrong, I'm very sorry to anyone who speaks Chinese. I'm really bad at Chinese pronunciations, I do apologise. If anyone's confused to see him this high, I get that, but he's also like really good, so like I really want to talk about him, so let's just watch him sing.
变成了你，我最终化成了喜悦。 사로잡을 수 있어서 하루 지난 너의 모든 것 난 하루하루 지난 너의 모든 것 나는 알 수가 있었어 这逆风了我也愿意美得让我看不见你 Turn the rewind 연들 매 멈춰 너와 나 행복했지 내呼吸都失去还在向你说
Outside of the top three, Zhoumi's voice is by far the most balanced and has the most versatility in terms of everyone's voice that it works really well. Some people might not hear that, or might not see that, or might just not have listened to his music kind of since Super Junior M stopped being a thing. But he's really, really good. He has kind of a naturally kind of thicker voice, but he also sings with a breathier coordination and a light coordination. But he does so with such freedom and such ease and such agility that he uses that as a choice. He can sing with chord closure if he wants to for that style. He can sing with a light, breathy delivery with that style, and the tuning is exceptional either way, and his voice works really well in both those areas. The middle of his voice is really balanced and really easy to produce. Again, occasionally he does it in a bit of a lighter style, or he kind of sings in a slightly thicker, more rich, darker way. And either way, his voice sounds really good in this area. As he goes into an upper mix, yes, his mix isn't kind of as impressive as Heechul's or as rocky and as big, but it's more balanced, it's more consistent, and as he kind of gets up to there, he puts a placement in his head and puts it a little bit more forward, and always kind of releases belts and kind of upper mixes with a lot of balance and a lot of ease and a lot of freedom. There isn't too much chest pull or chest grab or throatiness. His voice just sounds really at ease in this upper area, and his consistency is the highest I've mentioned so far. His versatility in tonal colours are, in my opinion, the highest I've mentioned so far, and all of his voice works really seamlessly, really easily, and really smoothly. Only issue is he doesn't kind of have the upper extension of the three guys I'm going to mention shortly, and his voice doesn't sound kind of as impressive as those guys, and maybe not even as impressive as Heechul possibly. But his voice is balanced, it's consistent, and it's got a lot more to it than I think everybody else has so far. So yeah, to me, I think he's a really, really great singer with really great potential and a lot of kind of versatility and flexibility in his voice, and he kind of goes a little bit under the radar. So yeah, Zhoumi's voice is awesome. Okay, so in everybody's list that I saw, the top three were the top three in different orders. Yesung is clearly a lot of people's kind of favourite, and I'm not gonna lie to you, he's my favourite as well. His voice is awesome, but he's objectively third. And I'll explain why in 1 second. Let's go. Okay, so Yesung's technique is half absolutely out of this world unbelievable, and half, what are you doing, man, please stay safe with your vocals. Basically, he has a naturally huskier, darker, fuller voice than the other two people in the vocal line. He almost operates in kind of the baritone role in like a barbershop quartet almost. His voice is thicker and fuller, but it also has really good ad-lib potential and can get into really, really high areas. His technique is ultra versatile, really interesting, really unique, and I'm like, how the hell with a voice like that do you do half the things that you do? Okay, so often when he's at his absolute best, he puts the placement in his head, brings up a little bit of connection, lightens the tone massively from the husky tone he naturally does, opens his mouth wide, unleashes big, blaring, bright, beautiful, voweled, open belts. His B4s and B-flat 4s are some of the best notes I've heard in music, and they're gorgeous, and I want to listen to them all day, every day. His technique in that area is fabulous, it's fantastic, and when he does that, he is awesome. Yesung has a little habit of pulling lots of weight. And yes, he can achieve them, yes, he's clearly done it very easily through most of his career, but I'm pretty sure he had to recover from vocal nodes at one point. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, that kind of makes sense. The guy sung so hard all the time, and while he got there and his voice was ultra unique, ultra varied, ultra versatile, and could pull chest up to like a C5, which is kind of mental for somebody with that thicker voice. It sounded fatiguing and heavy, and the other two guys coming up didn't do that and don't have that same placement issue. Yes, I think he did it for style. He could clearly do it in a more bright configuration, which is why I've put him third. Obviously, he had to be third, first, or second anyway, because he's part of one of the best vocal lines in K-pop just generally. But as he kind of stayed in that coordination, it was lighter, it was clearly a choice. That sounds better and stronger and more sustainable. When he kind of brings the throatiness up and he's pulling and you can hear all in his throat, yes, the tone is ultra unique, sounds incredible, and I love it. It kind of hurts to do that a lot of the time and always. So yes, while his ad-lib potential is unbelievable and subjectively he has one of the best voices ever, just from an objective standpoint, he had some technical things he could iron out. Yes, I think they were mainly choices, but they're choices that made his voice obviously strain a bit more than the other two guys coming up who had a much more balanced place all the time. So yeah, Yesung's voice is insane, it's amazing, I love it. He just occasionally pulled way too much weight up, and while he got there successfully, it sounded difficult. And when singing sounds difficult, you can't be first or second, you've got to be third, even when your instruments is varied and as powerful and as amazing as Yesung's is. Just the two guys coming up are more balanced all of the time. But he's still amazing, and please don't shout at me for not putting him first. I get why you guys put him first. Just objectively, he isn't, but he still rocks. Okay, so I'm going to go out on a limb here. I could be totally wrong as I do more of these videos, but Ryeowook is the best second place singer in K-pop. He has to be. There's nobody that can be this good and not first. His voice is absolutely unbelievable, and I can't wait to talk about it. Oh, let's just watch him sing. Alright, so you guys may know from the channel, I don't love nasal singing very much, and I've also mentioned if you put your voice into your nose, it can kind of struggle to do things. Yeah, Ryeowook kind of goes, haha, no Sam, you're an idiot, you're wrong, and goes, I'm going to sing within my nose and be one of the best singers ever. Okay, so basically the only slight negative and the reason he isn't first is he doesn't have much of a low register. His voice is super high, it's super in his nose, and he doesn't really do much in the lower end of his voice. He can do it, he can stay full, just not as well as number one. That is the only reason he isn't number one, because the upper range of his voice is absolutely borderline perfection. Okay, so yes, he puts it into his nose, and he kind of stays very balanced, very committed to that style, and yes, nasality can be an issue, but his isn't. It lightens his tone and gets him in a really free, easy place up in these keys. He's singing like A4s like they're nothing. He's got like a weird depth to his voice. It's clearly really high, but it doesn't sound like he's singing high. It sounds like he's singing in a modal, easy configuration. And he stays connected. His voice isn't so light and brittle it sounds whiny or like it's an issue. It sounds full. It sounds big. Sometimes when he takes a placement slightly out of his nose or brings up a little bit more chord closure, he unleashes these massive, super mega consistent belts. He sounds so comfortable in this higher upper belt range, by far more than anybody else who have like throat issues or placement issues or that bring up too much weight. He isn't. He's bringing up a nice amount of weight with really good balance in this higher key that sounds so fantastic. As well as that, he's got like an upper mix. He can do glissendos really well, which is where you kind of like do notes, up a note, and all that sort of thing, and like good runs and stuff. He's got good agility. Also, he has possibly the most developed head voice of any male idol I've ever heard. He doesn't like do it as much as I would kind of like, but he's got this really shrill, whiny, piercing head voice that he can do so easily and so well. I watched a video where they were trying to do some sort of like key change part. It was like, and they would like up in that area. And he did it easier than anybody else because his head voice is so fantastic, and I think his voice is unbelievable. And yeah, I'm not a huge fan of nasal placement normally, but he uses it to god tier levels of ability, and when he obviously kind of sacrifices a little bit of nasality and goes in this bigger belt, sounds unique, sounds robust, sounds comfortable, sounds easy, and his voice is just so free in this area, and I'm very jealous, and his voice is amazing. And yeah, as I say, he is definitely the best ever second place singer I've mentioned so far. Yeah, they're quite good, these lot. Number one. Right then. So subjectively, you put Yesung first, yeah, I understand. You put Ryeowook first, yeah, I understand. But objectively speaking, Kyuhyun's voice is possibly the most perfect idol voice I've heard so far. But that is a video for its own right, so I'm not going to wait on that just yet. But yeah, this guy is insane. Let's watch him sing.
짧지 않던 세월을 내가 어떻게 헤아릴 수가 있을까 떠나간 내 사랑은 어디에 모두 다 이런 미친 날들이 내 하루가 되면 말야 하고 싶은 말이 없는지 하얗게 쏟아지던 나라
Right then, what does he do with his voice? Everything. The whole thing works perfectly and so blended and so easy everywhere. Right, he's got a bit of a thicker tone than Ryeowook does. Nowhere near as thick as Yesung's. He doesn't sing in a gravelier style, but his low range is really developed. It's really full. It's nice and masculine. It doesn't sound like super low, but it's got a depth to it. He sounds very easy down here, very consistent, and it sounds really good. As he goes up into the middle of his voice, because it's a little bit heavier, you think he might struggle on some high notes. No, he doesn't at all. He has placement down to almost perfect levels of ability. He can either kind of keep the placement in his chest, but use enough head voice to blend down into to unleash big, open, resonant sounds. At this F4 and G4, his voice sounds enormous and like his belt has started already and it's comfortable, it's balanced, it's easy, and he's never going to struggle there. He doesn't bring up too much weight with throatiness. His placement isn't too nasal or too far back or anything like that. It's forward, it's open, it's really easy, and it's really resonant and really big. And I hate this word, but it has amazing support. His voice is so supported all the way through. Not one part of it sounds like he's wailing to get to a note or anything like that. It's so balanced. Above this, he could put his voice slightly into his nose, and there is a nasal placement there. If you don't like kind of a nasal tonal quality, this part of his voice might put you off a little bit, but that means he's lightening his tone to blend down into this beautiful, perfect, balanced mix. When he's doing Park Hye-shin's Wildflower, he sacrifices a little bit of the pitch, doesn't go for the C5, he goes for the B4, and when he does that, his voice sounds so big, so open, so resonant, and so fantastically strong, because he's bringing it into his nose a little bit and keeping a lot of weight and good balance from his head voice, unleashing these big, massive notes. Above that as well, when he goes into around the C5 belt, he puts it massively in his head and does these big, super forward, almost whiny, kind of metal kind of belts, where it sounds like it's closer to head voice, but it's still in a very strong, very developed mix. As well as that, he's got a pretty good head voice as well. So yeah, all around Kyuhyun's voice is kind of, you know, mentally good, and it sounds really good when it's down low, it sounds really good in his middle belt, it sounds really good when he brings it more into his nose and forward into kind of a higher belt, and then it sounds equally as good when he's into kind of more of a mass first head voice or kind of a stronger forward head voice placed belt. So yeah, Kyuhyun's voice, it's quite good, yeah. If you think he's third, alright, he's not. I get why you're saying he is, but it's a subjective preference. Kyuhyun is one of the best singers I've heard in SM or in K-pop, and I am willing to do a top 10 list on that to explain that fully. But yeah, thank you so much for requesting Super Junior. They have some very, very good singers that I kind of already knew about, but it was fun to kind of delve into them a little bit. Okay, you may be thinking, who's next? You've requested a lot of people, and in my community post I mentioned that there's a lot of people I'm going to try and do. I'm going to hop off the SM train for a little bit, give you guys some videos to look forward to in that kind of company. I'm going to go with some more smaller groups for now, just to get them quickly reeled off and that you guys really want them. So I've been requested Ace for ages and I've kind of held off on doing them. Next is going to be Ace. Yes, it won't get as many views or as many kind of people who care about that group, but you know what? A lot of you guys want it and I finally want to do that video for you. But we will hop back on the SM train at some point. Let's just take a small break to give you guys something to look forward to. Anyway, without further ado, thank you so much for watching this video. It was really fun and I hope you agreed or at least kind of understand where I'm coming from. And without further ado, see you later.